So as we saw in the previous lesson, one of the sorts of problems or questions that can arise when trading this entry model is that once we have step one, which is the POI mitigation, our medium time frame POI mitigation, and then we do step two, which is to look, first of all, is there a strong liquidation in the pullback? Yes, we have a low that broke a high, we have a strong liquidation. Okay, we have two steps. Step three is then, is this liquidation still relevant for us trading this POI, this idea? Okay, because the idea is that we're trying to get long from this POI and we are trying to anticipate that, that institutional order flow is going to continue bullish, and we want to see that there's been a strong liquidation first. Okay, there has been one, but sometimes there can be one that's quite far away, like in terms of vertical distance. This looks really, really far away. So the question is that still relevant? Are they really using the liquidity behind that low in order to get long, like all the way down here? Or sometimes it's more of like a horizontal distance where perhaps price is up here and it just corrects all the way through Asia and it's kind of like all the way like this, and you come to like the London session or whatever, and it's like, okay, we've taken that low over here. Is that still relevant, that liquidation over here, for us getting long here? Now, some of you might want to use discretion because you might think it is. Like the best textbook trades are where it's just obvious, right? The strong liquidation literally occurs just before or within your POI, right? Price comes in, you get the fake break, you get the liquidation. It's right within the POI. It's right in the immediate price action that forms right in front of your eyes. Bang. There's no real if, buts, or maybes. Okay, but sometimes these trades do play out where the liquidation is a bit far away. So if you don't want to use discretion and you want a mechanical rule, well, you saw the first rule that we suggested in the previous lesson, and that's the PBL method, right? So that is this diagram here where when we get step one, okay, POI mitigation. Step two, was there a strong liquidation? Yes, we have a low that broke a high that then got liquidated. Step three, is this liquidation still relevant? Well, in this case, no, because price already pulled back to the PBL, the point before the liquidation, the supply that took out that low. The PBL then held and it made a candle body closure break of the low. It made a new low. So if you use the PBL method to define whether or not these liquidations are still relevant for us getting long here, then this would be invalid for you, right? Because the PBL held and it made a new low by the time that we're looking for the entry. Whereas here, yes, we get the strong liquidation, we've got the POI mitigation, but we can take this trade because the PBL didn't get mitigated and it didn't make a new low, right? So if you're not comfortable and you don't understand the PBL method, please go and watch the previous video to make sure you understand it. That, at the time of recording, is the method that I personally use. It's the method that I've tested. And yeah, that's the one, well, I've used it. But in this lesson, you're learning the second method, and that is the early entry invalidation method. So essentially what this method does is, if I just show these candles, is if it gives an entry before your POI mitigation, then it's no longer valid. Okay, so what that means is we get our POI mitigation step one, right? Step two, has there been a strong liquidation? Yes, we can see that there was a strong liquidation here. We got the fake break, that then got liquidated. But what we then need to study is the price action from that liquidation before we get our POI mitigation. And if we can see that it basically already has given an entry before we get our mitigation, then it's no longer valid. So as we can see, we got the liquidation here, price is then moving down, but then what do we get? We get a candle that breaks the previous candle's high. So that technically would be an entry if this was within our POI, right? Because we would have been tagged into the position, because we'd be following the liquidation down and then price moves up and it would have tagged us in, right? So if that was, after a POI mitigation, that would be a valid entry. So when we actually get our POI mitigation and we're looking to see, okay, can we still trade the strong liquidation here? But you use the this second method, which is called the early entry invalidation method. I know it could be a better name, but as we can see, right, it broke the previous candle's high, therefore this would have been an entry. That now means this trade idea is no longer valid for you, and you would need to see a new strong liquidation form. Okay, so to say that again, step one, POI mitigation, yes. Step two, do we have a strong liquidation? Yes. Step three, is this strong liquidation still valid? Well, with this method, the early entry invalidation method, it's no longer relevant because it gave an entry here. Now, this is not an entry we're going to take. Why? Because there's no POI mitigation at this point, right? We need the POI mitigation. But as you can see, because it did break the high and essentially it gave an entry, It's not a valid entry, but it gave an entry in terms of the lower time frame price action. That now means it's no longer valid, and you would need to see a new strong liquidation built here. You need to see a new fake break and give you a new entry. So yeah, that's basically it. I'll just show you one more diagram. So this is where you have the two methods side by side. So in the previous lesson, we learned the PBL method, right? Once we get our POI mitigation, if the PBL was already held and made a new low, then we don't look for a trade. That's one method. Okay, so you only use one method. You don't use both. You have to pick one, right? So that's the PBL method that we learned before. In this lesson, we're calling it the early entry method, the early entry invalidation method, whatever. And basically, once you get the strong liquidation, if it gives an early entry here before we get our POI mitigation, then this liquidation is invalidated and you need to see a new one form. Okay? So again, you pick one. You do not use both. Pick one and stick to it consistently. I personally have tested this one. I haven't tested this approach, but Tomas has used this approach with his testing. He just preferred that way. It resonated with him more. So yeah, just pick one, test it, see what works for you. I don't have the data to kind of say which one is better because I haven't tested this approach. I would say in theory, I could be wrong, but in theory, this approach to me would seem more conservative because, you know, I'm happy if price does give that early entry, but then comes in here, I'm still happy to trade that liquidation. Whereas if you use this method, then obviously it's no longer valid. I personally use the PBL method. Okay, so yeah, I'll just go over that one more time. If the strong liquidation occurs and price is pulling back, but then it gives that entry before we get the POI mitigation, then this liquidation is no longer valid and you would need to see a new one form. Okay, it really is as simple as that. So let's take a look at a real example. Alrighty, so I was actually struggling to find kind of a good price action example to show you. So what I've done here is I've kind of made up where the medium time frame POI is. I think the true one is more like this, but just for me to explain the example, imagine that this is kind of where the actual medium time frame POI is. Okay, so obviously step one, we need to wait for the medium time frame POI mitigation first. Okay, now we've got it, right? So imagine we want to trade short from this M15 POI and we're looking for that entry. Okay, so we have step one, which is the POI mitigation. Step two, do we have a strong liquidation? Well, a tip to kind of do this is just look at the next nearest high. Is this a strong liquidation here? Well, did this high achieve anything? Did it break any structure to the left? No, it didn't break any lows to the left. So that is a weak high. It is not a strong liquidation. So now let's look at the next highest high. It would be this high here. Was this a strong high? Did it break any structure to the left? Yes, we can see it broke that low. Okay, so here we have a high that broke an M5 low to the left, right? It caused an M5 chock. So now we take the highest point that caused a break of that low, right? We always take the highest point for the strong liquidation. Okay, so now step one, POI mitigation. Step two, strong liquidation. Step three, is this strong liquidation still relevant for this POI? Well, how do we define that? Well, if we're using the early entry invalidation method, method number two, we have to see, since the strong liquidation occurred here, did it give an entry? Okay, well, from this candle, if we were entering short, does price break the candle's low? No, it pushes up first, okay? And then if we were entering short on this candle, does price break the previous candle's low? No, it pushes up. So then we'd be tracking to this candle, right? Now, the next candle does break that candle's low. So what that means is if we were in the POI at this point and we did have the POI mitigation, and then you were looking to trade this short, so you'd have your stop order below this candle's low, right? If I move it there, and you'd have your stop loss behind the high, that means it's already given an entry. Because we got the liquidation here, this candle breaks the previous candle's high, breaks that candle's high, breaks that candle's high. So we'd be moving our entry, our sell stop below each candle, right? And then here, this candle breaks the previous candle's lows first, and then it pushes up. So we would be in the trade if that was a POI mitigation, okay? But it wasn't, because we're saying the M15 POI is up here. So because it gave an entry here on this 345 candle, that means there has now been an early entry, and therefore, if you use this method, once we get the POI mitigation, this liquidation is no longer relevant for us. It's no longer valid because there was an entry here, because this candle broke the previous candle's low, and that would have given an entry, and then you would be in the trade. Okay, so that's method two. It's a horrible name, but we're calling it the early entry invalidation method. It gave an entry here. So therefore, by the time we get a POI mitigation, we say that this liquidation is no longer valid. Therefore, if you want to trade from here, what do you need to see? You need to see a high that breaks a low, and then you would look for that strong liquidation here, and then that would give you a valid entry. Okay, you need to see new strong liquidity build if you use this method. If you use the PBL method, is this trade idea still valid? Method 1, well, where's the PBL? We look for the demand that liquidated this high. So this is where the high gets liquidated. So we look back, where's the valid demand? This to me would be the clear pivot demand that led to the break of that high. And as we can see, it's completely unmitigated. Therefore, if you use the PBL method, then now you are allowed to take this trade because step 1, POI mitigation. Step 2, is there a strong liquidation? Yes, we have a high here that broke the low to the left. So we have a valid strong liquidation. Step 3, is this strong liquidation still relevant for this POI? If we use the PBL method, it is, because the PBL is unmitigated, right? Otherwise, we'd have to see a mitigation and it caused a higher high. If it had done that, then we would say, yes, the PBL has done its job, therefore we would need to see a new strong liquidation. But it hasn't. So the PBL method, this would be a valid entry, okay? And you could take this short. If you use the second method, the early entry invalidation method, right, then we can't take this trade. This liquidation is no longer relevant. Why? Because it gave an entry here. You would have got short on this candle here because price broke the low, you would have been tagged in, right? Obviously, that's not a trade we take because we didn't have the POI mitigation, but the fact that it gave an early entry means it's invalid now. You need to see a new one. So that really is as clear as I can make it. Hopefully there's not too much confusion around that. But yeah, the key thing is that you pick one method. If you want a mechanical method for solving the question of is this liquidation still relevant, either use the PBL method or use the early entry invalidation method. Okay, I personally have only tested this approach. Tomas has tested the early entry invalidation method, okay, with the swing trading in his approach, but I wouldn't say one is necessarily better than the other. Pick what one you resonate with, maybe just forward test both and keep an eye on it and see how you go. Like I said, I think in theory, the early invalidation method would be a bit more conservative because it's much more likely to cancel trades, sort of invalidate them for you, but I could be completely wrong. I haven't tested the data, I don't know, but there are two 100% mechanical methods that you can use, but pick one and yeah, just see how you go with it.